Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to NPO's interactive session. This is Aisha Al-Musa, Investor Relation Officer. In today's session, we will discuss our financial results for the year ended during 2024. Before we start, I would like to remind you all, if you're facing any technical issues or with the sounds, please feel free to type in the chat so we can assist you accordingly. Now, let me introduce you to our esteemed management. We have here Mr. Abdullah Hinai, our Chief Executive Officer, and Mr. Giri, our Chief Financial Officer. We also have Swami from Business Performance, and Mr. Rashad Al-Dah from Regulatory Reporting and A&M, and Mr. Balaji, Head of Investor Relations, joining us remotely. And we also have Ms. Jawahar Al-Tamami and Mr. Abdullah Blushi from Board Secretary. Mr. Abdullah, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us in today's presentation. As briefed by Aisha, basically we're going to present our financial performance as of 31st December 2024 and as disclosed to the market end of January 2025. We have a very standard presentation. I'll quickly take you through the slides, the initial slides, and then my colleague Giri will be taking us into detailed financial performance. But before I start on the presentation, again, we'd like to thank everyone that supported us in our journey that started in 2021. Alhamdulillah, we've been performing extremely well over the past 4 years now. We've entered in 2025 our fifth year of our 5-year strategy. And we are quite proud in terms of our achievement in the past year. 2024, we witnessed the highest profitability ever achieved by the organization in its 52 years history. This slide in front of you has certain key messages that we would like to reiterate. The key aspect is that we are the first commercial bank, locally incorporated commercial bank, and was founded in 1973. This means that we bring with us strong and long-term relationship with different segments of the market, be it local companies, government and government entities, as well as individuals. We have a very strong management team. We continuously review the strength of and expertise and knowledge of our colleagues. We continuously add new experiences as and when that is required and as demonstrated last year. Overall, we have a collective experience of over 100 years in banking. Like I mentioned, in 2021, January 2021, we embarked on a 5-year journey. And the title of the journey is Return to Prominence. We strongly believe that we've maintained and achieved a lot of the KPIs that we've set to ourselves, given the challenging global macro picture, as well as local challenges and changes and volatility that's been there in the market over the past 4 years. We are on the 5th year of that strategy. We believe that this year will continue the same pace that we've seen and witnessed over the past 4 years. We are also embarking now in terms of preparation for the new strategy. We will come to the market as and when that has been approved by different internal stakeholders. The other aspect that I would like to also discuss here, we predominantly operate in the Omani market. Majority of our revenues come from our relationships in Oman. We believe that Oman provides a very strong macroeconomic market for us with strong stability. And we've seen rating agency emphasize that aspect about Oman. And with one of the rating agency actually bringing back the rating of the country back to the investment grade. We are hopeful that others will follow suit. As a bank, we are proud in terms of our technologies. We continue to invest selectively in certain specific areas. We've committed to the board and shareholders, and if you go back to our past presentation, we continuously are committed in terms of making significant investment in technology to ensure that we are market leader there. Another key strength for the bank is the shareholder base. Commercial Bank of Qatar and Suhail Bahawan together, Sheikh Suhail Bahawan himself together own close to 49% of the bank equity, with the government and quasi-government owning close to 35% of the bank equity. So a very strong shareholder base. We do benefit from their expertise, knowledge, and market access and a lot of our endeavors. Next slide, please. Slide number 8. I'm skipping the overall economic picture. I think you're all familiar, and I'll take you to the Omani banking sector. Slide 8. Again, the banking sector has proven to be a quite resilient sector. Coming out of the pandemic situation, the volatile USD rates, etc., and has been able to post a quite strong recovery. This slide shows the continued growth in the balance sheet and financial parameters of the Omani banking sector. Clearly, in the past 1 year, there was a stronger growth on the liability side, the deposit base, vis-a-vis the growth in the loan segments, showing a strong liquidity position for Omani banking sector. CBO continue to be the main regulator for Omani banks, and they are quite active in monitoring and ensuring adherence to very prudent and strict ratios. It's important also to mention that earlier this year, beginning of 2025, there was a royal decree issued by His Majesty Sultan Haytham, issuing a new banking law. We are reviewing the new law, and we expect
current level of solar value. Okay.
yes.
They said, but as of now, the EBITDA is higher, but your EBITDA would not remain the same for the next year, no?
There's been an issue. The government has issued a new banking law, which basically we are waiting for more circulars and regulations from the Central Bank of. Next slide. Yeah, next slide. On the sustainability, the country has embarked and has committed in terms of focus on sustainability. It is part of Oman 2040 vision, and the slide demonstrates some of the key aspects and asks in terms of the sustainability element. NVO itself has embarked on that journey, and we expect that we will publish our first report sometime in end of Q1, early Q2 of this year, as per required by regulations. With that, I would request Iri to take us through specific details of NVO. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take it at this stage, or after he finishes his financial sections.
Thank you, Abu Hisham. Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum to all of you. So the first slide is slide number 10, which you see on your screen, we are familiar with. We have mentioned that we are the first Omani commercial bank, 1973 establishment. At the end of 31st December 2024, we had 1,434 employees. We've given you some facts around the number of customers and the number of branches that we have, etc. On Egypt, we've mentioned that before. We are in the process of legal closure of the operations in Egypt. Our primary focus is Oman and the corridor business with UAE. Within Oman, clearly, you're aware of our comprehensive universal bank approach, where we do retail, wholesale, international, and Islamic banking. The CEO mentioned that it has been a record year for us. This is the highest profit that this bank has reported. So you can see below in the key financials, at asset growth, grew robustly. We finished the year at 13.6 billion of assets, US dollars, of course. Net loans of just over 10 billion. Okay, and a net profit of 164 million, up from 151 million at the end of 2023. I will cover these numbers in the subsequent slides. On the right side, you see the shareholding as well as the rating that we've had. We can quickly move to the next slide. In terms of our own priorities, clearly, the 5-year strategy, the CEO alluded to the 5-year strategy that was created at the end of 2020, beginning of 2021 onwards was our first year of execution. We are now in the last year of execution of the 5-year strategy. We are working on the strategy plans for the next 5 years. The strategy plan, just to very quickly recap, because we have presented this more than once, is basically 3 areas. The balance sheet focusing on the liquidity, capital, and asset quality. These are 3 key pillars for us. For those of you who are attending these calls for the first time, in 2021, or late 2020, we had a 81 that was due for call, and we didn't call it. The first thing the CEO and I did when we came on board was to do a private placement and call that. Capital is a very important pillar for us, and liquidity as well. So you will see when I talk about our capital adequacy ratio at the end of 2024 at 17.1%, we are very well capitalized, and we are liquid as set out in the Basel III ratios. Asset quality with the NPL ratio sub 5%, we've improved our asset quality, and I'll cover that when I talk a little bit, provide a little more color to you on the asset quality. Then the business model involved 3 areas again. One is revenue. Clearly, growing the top line is an important priority for us. When we started our 5-year journey, our cost income ratio was about 56%. For the year end of 2024, we just below 42% and better than the industry as well. So through careful management of the cost base and investing wisely, we've been able to achieve that. The partnership pillar requires us to work within the bank closely with every division, but also with our external partners, including the regulators, the stakeholders, and the other investors as well, and our customers, of course, are our partners. And the third thing we talked about was sustainability. The CEO alluded to compliance with the ESG mandates for this year. But in terms of the sustainability, then we identified 3 areas, which are the brand, the digital channels, we have award-winning digital channel proposition, and lastly, but most importantly, our people, who continue to be our area of focus. So that's the key priorities for us. These are known slides for us, so I didn't spend too much time, and we've kept the slide the same in each of our presentations over the last 3 years at least. Okay, we can move on, please. Then Given the focus on ESG, ESG is now an integral part of each of these pillars, whether it be liquidity, capital, asset quality, or the digital channels. We talk about various actions within each of these pillars. Our intent would be to make this as a way of life in everything that we do. And more color on this as we set out our prior strategic plan for the next 5 years. That's what we're doing. Okay. Similar slide on the next, we talked about the other pillars, whether it be people and brand, revenue, optimization, and partnership. Clearly, in each of these areas, some of this involves a mindset change amongst our stakeholders and our employees. We are driving that slowly but surely. Okay, that's what we want to highlight. Lastly, before I go into specific numbers, a slide that talks about our commitment, where by the 30 ESG matrices and a standalone ESG report, would come out at the end of the quarter in line with the MSX disclosure guidelines. We are working on that. And as I covered earlier, and the CEO as well alluded, we're firming up our map for ESG implementation and also agreeing on targets 2025 and beyond. Now, obviously, you see a lot of noise around with major banks walking away from some of these goals, etc. We'll have to play and see how all of this filters in the Middle East region and what some of this is going to pan out. But we're not letting that distract from us, from our core goal of publishing the 30 matrices and the disclosure report by Q1 this year. So that was a summary of our strategy and main priorities. I'm going to give you key financial highlights and then put a few slides around the balance sheet, P&L, asset quality, capital and liquidity, and then we'll pause for questions. And so the first thing I want to call out is that the profit for the year was $163.8 million, up by 8.7%. This is the highest that NBO has ever reported, number one point. Number two, our assets, 13.6, I alluded to this number earlier, 8.7%, up 8.7% over the last year. What were the components of the asset growth then? Deposit growth, which was 14.4%. The CEO mentioned this as well. Not only MBO, but most of the banks in Oman had grown the deposits faster than loans. Why is that? Obviously, from our perspective, from MBO's perspective, we grow the loan book in a very cautious manner. Later, when you see the sectoral breakdown, you will see that our focus has been on the GRE stroke, that kind of credit. So clearly, opportunity. We are very careful about growing and thoughtful in the segments and the customers that we want to go after. So clearly, those two aspects, both customer deposit and gross loans, which grew, by 11.6% year on year, are key items of the growth. Fairly straightforward balance sheet. There are no complex derivatives or anything like that in the balance sheet at all. Then the 81, we've already taken approval for $300 million of 81 issuance. During 2024, we completed 150 million of that issuance. Earlier, we had completed the remaining portion. So effectively, this takes up our capital adequacy ratio on a CET1 basis to 11.5% and total CAR at 17.1%, well above the central bank norms. Last but not least, a couple of P&L items for you. One is the impairment number. 10% reduction is not because we are providing less, but as I mentioned, our growth in the 2/3 of our growth over the last 3 years has been the GRE segment. Clearly, that should filter in. Secondly, we had a good year in terms of the recoveries, which have also been able to help us to reduce the gross charge, the net impairment charge to P&L. Fee income was a very strong story for us. We are conscious that while we chase growth, it can't be all balance sheet driven. So a key focus area for us has been growing the fee income. Okay, so that's basically the headline. Let's quickly go into the other slides, and I've got 3-4 slides at best to cover in detail, and then we'll stop for Q&A. So operating profit, I've covered most of these already. And you see the first point there talking about net interest income and that coming off. That's primarily because of cost of funds, high cost of funds, and that's an issue not for NBO alone, but for the industry. But also, our focus has been on GRE exposure. I repeat, 2/3 of our growth over the last 3 years have come through the GRE loan growth. These are finely priced. Our view is that we would, not compromise on this in terms of asset quality, albeit the margins being slightly lower. Cost income ratio I covered. Let me provide a little bit of color. You've seen that our cost income ratio has been decreasing year on year, primarily not because we are not investing in the business, but we have an optimization program. So effectively, for the last few years, we have renegotiated every contract that we have. We are very thoughtful in terms of additional people that we hire, but that doesn't mean we don't hire. We continue to invest in 3 areas. Number 1, our people. Number 2, our brand and branches. Number 3, our technology. These are 3 areas that we are very thoughtful in terms of how we invest. We cut out and we've eliminated a lot of bad costs already, but we've created space in the P&L to sustain some of these investments. So in terms of matrices, you see the return on assets, return on average equity, assets employed, etc., all improving in the right direction, very importantly for us. Then the impairment story I covered, basically on why it's lower. It's not because we're providing less, I repeat. It's because the collections were better last year, and also as the asset quality improved. So on the right side, you see the chart which talks about the cost income ratio, the ROE, ROA, etc., improvement in these ratios. And also talk about the left side bottom table gives you the composition of our income between net interest income, other operating income, and also staff cost and other operating expenses. You do see that the staff cost number has remained broadly flat between 22 and 24, while other operating expenses reflect the investment that we are making in the areas that I just talked about. So we move to the next slide. A favorite slide of ours, which talks about the asset quality. 12% asset growth, mainly driven by exposure to sovereign and GRE. We have a diversified loan portfolio, clearly, well diversified. Continuously, we are building our stage 1 to 3 provisions. We look at total provision of 4.1%. NPL, again, that's because of reclassification of some exposures, but still below the 5% bank. And then the stage 2 loans, which has come off, from 20.6% to 13.6%. You see on the right side our exposure by stages. Again, we monitor all of this. It's a very strong partnership between me as a CFO and the Chief Risk Officer and the CEO in terms of what approach we take for loans. Together, we work with the businesses to achieve desired outcomes. That's really my call out on this slide. Again, very pleased with what we've been able to build for this bank over the last 3 years. In one of the calls, and I'm sure this question is going to come up, we seem to be a boring bank, but perhaps so. But we don't believe in giving surprises. We want to grow steadily and in a manner being both well capitalized and liquid. That's our framework, and that neatly leads into what I want to talk about next, which is the capital and funding and liquidity slide. And then I've got a slide on Muzn, our Islamic bank, and then I'll stop for questions and comments, please. So you look at how we fund the book. Our CASA ratio on the right side, you see that current and savings account and call accounts comprise of 50.5% of our deposits. Term deposits are at 49.5%. Could the ratio be higher? Yeah, perhaps. But it's not just CASA for the sake of CASA. It has to be priced attractively, and you all know how the cost of funds in Oman went up over the last 18 months. MBO is no exception. But we talked to you all about how we manage liquidity in the bank. We have the CEO and I share a weekly liquidity stroke balance sheet meeting where we sit down with the businesses and look at how what rates we are bringing in the deposits, what are the areas of focus, etc. That's what we do. So you look at how we look at some of this in a prudent manner. Then we talk about liquidity ratios there. Liquid asset ratio is 21.9%. Liquidity coverage ratio, again, LCR at 277%. So very well capitalized and liquid. I've already talked about the capitalization levels. CET1 also I talked about. We are at 11.5 against the regulatory minimum of 9.5 with a 2% buffer. We do have an ICAP process in place, so we manage this on a very tight basis. I also talked to you about the 81 issuance that did. The issuance is again listed in Dublin. So we continue, the CEO and I believe that at any given point in time, we'd like to have some papers which are listed internationally. We will continue to, explore further opportunities during 25 and early part of 26 to be able to be more visible to our international investors. My last slide is on Muzen, and then I will pause. So Muzen has been an area of growth for us. Some of you expressed an interest to see what we are doing in Muzen. For us, for the CEO and I, this is a particularly rewarding area. When we started our journey with NBO, we were trying to see what are the engines of growth, where are the areas of focus. So two areas which were at that point struggling. One was our international operations, which is Dubai, UAE, that is, sorry, not Dubai. And the other was Muzen. So if you see from Muzen's performance, then you could argue that it's growth at a small base, off of small base. I do agree with that. But that said, look at our CAGR basis, what we've achieved. I think that's really good in terms of the profit as well. The profit growth is quite impressive. Small, I acknowledge, but that's an area of focus, and we continue to grow our Muzen. We completed the rebranding of Muzen. You see a fresh look in our branches, etc. That was my last slide on performance. Clearly, the detailed balance sheet has been given as an appendix. To sum up, 2024 was our record year in terms of our profit. We are well capitalized and liquid. We have a clearly defined strategy on which we are executing. This is the last year of our 5-year strategy. We are working on the next 5-year strategy, and we will update investors at the right time on this after the approval of the board, etc., which I expect will be in Q1 2026. That's really what I wanted to cover. I'll just ask if Abu Hisham wants to add anything, and then we can open up for Q&A.
I think we covered most of the presentations. We are happy now to see if there's any questions that we've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdullah. Thank you, Gary. Please, if anyone have any question, you can open your mic and ask them.
Please.
Go ahead.
Please go ahead.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the opportunity, and I apologize for the disturbance earlier. I had a question regarding the coverage of the bank. As you mentioned in the presentation, your coverage ratio has declined. So should we be expecting any accelerated costs or accelerated coverage, or any infection booked in the upcoming quarters to get your coverage back up to over 95%?
Some elements in terms of where we are in terms of underwriting quality, etc., and then maybe Giri will directly answer your question. I think it's very critical just to understand the business that we've been working over the past 4 years. Like Giri had mentioned multiple times in the presentation, 2/3 of our growth has come in from high quality, high caliber GRE, quasi-GRE exposures. That includes Muzen on the Islamic banking side, as well as our operations in UAE. So that's number one. Number two, in terms of the views and the staging of our book as well, we tend to be more on the conservative side. So you see us and certain names that maybe we share with peers, always more aggressive in terms of any downgrade and any ECL provisioning required at any of the 3 stages. Most of the changes that would have happened would have been a migration from one stage to another, rather than substantial new names that has come into our NPA book. Here, you have one specific.
Yes, thank you. You basically covered it. So our approach to provisioning has been prudence, and we set that out 4 years ago. Right, we will not hesitate to provide where it's absolutely required, and similarly, we're not going to go extremely conservative. So that's been the one. Second, the CEO covered the risk appetite point, where the GRE forms a big portion of our growth. The particular reduction in the coverage ratio at the year end was because of a reclassification of an exposure from stage 2 to stage 3. Obviously, we don't discuss customer names, but that exposure obviously impacted the coverage ratio. But all I would ask you to look at is just not coverage ratio, it's just one metric. It's an important metric, no question, but look at the sectoral composition of the book as well, and look at it. And we're very mindful of that. Would we be in a hurry to take the coverage ratio up in this quarter? Not really, because we have regular conversation with the board risk committee on what we're doing and our approach to provisioning. We're in a good space, and and we will gradually build this up during this year.
Yeah. So it's important that we continuously maintain the earlier prudent approach. I would like to repeat the fact that there's no specific, maybe detailed information that you can compare with our peers, but our conversation with peers, our conversation with regulators have clearly demonstrated that we are way advanced in terms of both identification, classification, and coverage of the different stages.
Further questions?
Any questions, Rob?
Hello?
Sure.
Hi, good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yep.
Hello?
Yes, please go ahead.
We can hear you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Giri. This is Bishan Bhalla here. Thank you for the call and the presentation. Congratulations on a fantastic set of numbers. You mentioned that you embarked on this journey of the 5 years sort of transformative plan, and it's we've seen the results. It's there for everyone to see. So congratulations on that. As you embark on the next phase, if you could just give us some sort of key milestone in terms of what's an aspirational ROE, what are some of the sort of key metrics you've spoken so often about jaws. If you could just give us some sort of qualitative and quantitative sort of metrics, if we could sort of get some guidance over there.
So I'll take this is Abdullah. First of all, thank you very much for your kind words. You've witnessed our journey, so I hope you are quite satisfied in terms of what has happened over the past 4 years.
So far, so good.
Great, thank you. Like I mentioned in my introduction, we are working on the new 5-year strategy. We kickstarted this process earlier this year. We'll move it fast forward probably after the holy month of Ramadan, inshallah. And of course, it will have to be presented to the board. But in terms of broad ideas or concepts, like I mentioned, our first 5 years is return to prominence. We had 3 key strategic objectives, which is safeguarding, value creation, and sustainability of that performance. This is based on the history of the organization, where we were coming out of COVID. We had issues, for example, in UAE and in Oman in terms of NPA. The capital had issues and certain elements of liquidity. And we lost certain business, and cost to income ratio was more than 55% in end of 2020. And like you are aware, historically the bank has gone through a cycle of 3 years of performance and then a drop of another 3 years and quite volatile. So the priorities were based on the conversation we had with the board, the views and key shareholders of the bank and what they wanted to see in the bank. Going forward, we want to position the bank in terms of preferred and this was part of the original 5-year strategy. We said the second phase of the strategy is to position the bank as the preferred bank in the market. You're not saying the largest, not necessarily being size, but in terms of key efficiencies and key return on equity expectations. We are touching the 9% ROE, for example. We are working and figuring out ways of hopefully bringing it up to double digits. Hopefully not high, but on the lower end of the double digit range. In terms of cost to income ratio, our investments in technology, both on the retail banking side as well as the corporate banking side, in addition to the operational back office, will hopefully enable us to maintain a very strong cost to income ratio vis-a-vis the market here. As you are aware, the market operates on a cost to income ratio that maybe ranges in the high 30s, 39% to more than 45%. So we always want to be in the top quartile. We're still crunching the numbers, but again, my personal wish is to be around the 40% range. There are systematic issues in Oman that will not enable us to continuously bring it that down. And also, we are very cognizant that technology is changing quite fast, rapid changes. So we always want to maintain a leadership position there. So we want to maintain our investment pace as long as it is, there's a clear business rationale behind it, a commercial rationale behind it. That's broadly. In terms of market segments, we are now believe that with a strong macroeconomic picture, the private sector should now increase its activities. We are seeing pockets of opportunities, be it in oil and gas, on the construction side, on the supplier side, etc. So we are gearing and ensuring ourselves well positioned into those segments, with GRE and government to continue to be also an important segment. As a result of the capex that is happening in the country, and we believe that there are more expected in the near future, the retail side will also will be contributing. So again, developing our retail proposition and enhancing that piece. The regulatory framework that is changing and moving quite fast. I don't know if you are aware that towards the end of January or early February, there was a new circular from the Central Bank of Oman designating about 8 sectors as priority sectors for banking, and basically putting minimum thresholds in terms of allocation to these sectors. We are studying that and putting appropriate strategies for those sectors. There's a bit of incentive that the central bank has given the banks with lower risk weight allocation for different sectors. Ranges, I think, from 70 to 90% compared to 100% in the normal sectors. I hope that gives you a bit of flavor. I know I cannot go into details. It's still work in progress and at a very early stage of that. But we are happy to engage with the community to have a conversation. And basically, we would also want to get feedback from the market of what's their expectation from the banking sector in general and in particular of India.
Well-rounded answer. I think that answers my query. Just one clarification. You mentioned about ROE and a sort of double-digit aspirational ROE. That's an adjusted ROE that you're talking about, right?
No, I'd look at it at a gross level itself, which hope you're well, this Giri. Yeah, so at a gross level. See, currently, Oman's now inched up into the investment grade. Despite that, a return, I would think cost of capital, I would have, if you'd asked me 2 years ago, which you did in terms of the cost of capital, I would have said it's around 13%. I'd say now it's reaching towards the 12% mark. Our first goal in that next 5 years should be, returns exceeding the cost of capital, right? So that's how I look at it. Hope I'll give
No,
you
no,
some flavor. Yeah.
fantastic. The only reason I asked or I mentioned the word adjusted ROE is because a seasoned banker and a team like yourselves would use the terminology of adjusted ROE, irrespective of what the number is or what the aspiration number is. When I as an analyst look at ROE, I always want it to be on an adjusted basis because the perpetual interest is explicit. It has to be serviced, barring dire circumstances which would not be ideal. So when the bank raises that money, they obviously earn some interest or some returns on that. So it only be fair and prudent to report adjusted ROE, irrespective of what that number is. That's where I was coming from, sir.
It's in a way adjusted, but I agree with this point.
So it's a question of what the market's familiar with locally. I don't want to. Recently, one of my former employees got into a new terminology, and the market in particular. So it's about making sure that people understand terminology that we use. I'm very conscious of that, but it's excluded from both. But we can use that going forward, Vision. Yeah. Thank you once again for all your support.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Mr. Giri. Take care. Thank you.
Salmi, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Abbas Muslimi from Vision Capital. Thank you for the call. I was wondering, Abdullah, if I can, get your views on spreads. Obviously the company's cost of funds went up in line with interest rates, and you could not pass on a large portion of that, right? So your NIMs compressed, your spreads came down. How do you see that behaving in 2025? That's my first question.
Question, and then Gary has more. So you're right, and the cost of fund, in particular on the dollar side, has increased substantially, affecting maybe even regional markets, not necessarily on the Oman. But if you compare the situation in Q1 of 2024 and compare it to the year-end situation, there's a substantial improvement that has happened for two reasons. One, like Giri had mentioned, our asset liability management approach, and we've mentioned this a number of times in the past. We do weekly review of all ALCO matters because situation changes virtually on a weekly basis. For example, if we had discussion in Q4, we would have of 2024, we would have said there would be multiple rate cuts for 2025. But standing today, I think there's a bit of market consensus that potentially, at best, there could be only one rate cut. Who knows? Reality could be very different, or could still be surprised. But again, the situation changed, and we have to react to each of these kind of discussions that happen globally. But our approach was slowly reduce all our cost of fund. We've raised on strategic and opportunistic basis new sources of funding for us, be it from deposit and be it from syndication and bilaterals with our counterparts globally. If you see, we've reduced actually our bilateral and syndication loans to about $500 million approximately by year end, reducing cost of funds there. We've taken market leadership in the local market on the cost of fund as well, and we've reduced the costs or the participation in any fundraising in the local market. So we've been quite aggressively focused on the cost of fund piece. The question of passing this increased cost to customers, there were multiple opportunities to do so, but it's also as a critical and responsible participants in this society, we didn't deem it as fit to pass every cost because it would have been a struggle. So we've been successful in areas that we needed to do so, but we also refrained from certain elements. So we made sure that, we don't lose market share nor affect the borrower by additional costs. But on the cost of funds, we've been quite successful in releasing that element.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, sorry, Giri, you were adding something.
No, I think we've answered most of this point. Your point was how do we expect to manage it or going forward? Listen, the key question is, I think it's about effective management. Some things are outside of our control, but what we are with is in our control. We manage more effectively to keep it stable would be my view. Okay, a great question. Thank you, and ready for your next.
Yeah, the second question is aspirationally, Abdullah mentioned that cost to income aspiration is late 30s. So obviously for that to happen, you need like a wider jaw ratio, right? It's happening, but I feel like what's going to change it?
Yeah, the high 30s. I said the market range today is between high 30s. Our aspirations are around the 40%.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Clear. Okay. So for that to happen, maybe you need a bit of push from fee income, right? You're already out because your net interest income actually came down last year, but you did very well on the fee income. So I was trying to relate it to that in terms of aspirations on the fee income side, non-funded income.
No, exactly. That's exactly our aspiration in that element. We've demonstrated that last year with quite a strong growth on the non-fund income side, the fee income side. And again, not simply by raising fees and charges, but focusing on certain business segments like the trade side. Trade finance is a focus area. There's a lot that we are doing there. Participation in different, taking leadership role in certain syndications, etc. That adds a layer of fees there. Investment banking and asset management activity is another focus area. Wealth management and remittance is more on the retail side is also another focus area. So these are the kind of business lines that we want to enhance. We've achieved about 30% of total income from fees. We would want to see that inching up further in the next 5 years.
Got it. Clear. I don't know if any of my colleagues asked you. I mean, NBO is top quartile, or top decile, in fact, when it comes to adjusted ROEs. But on your coverage ratios, you're lagging, your sort of bigger peers. Your cost of risk is one of the most stable ones for the last many years. And I appreciate that. The book has moved, on the cost of, at least from the risk point of view, it's been consistent. Your restructured loans are proof of that, the lowest in the sector. But your coverage ratios still haven't inched up. They're close to the 85% level, 86% level. So what's going on? I mean, is the devil in the details? Am I missing something? Am I giving a very simplistic, I'm taking a very simplistic view of this? I was just understanding what's happening on the coverage side. Are you? Yeah, please.
Touched upon that piece, and as we said, we are very confident that our approach is very prudent in terms of staging of our book. We think we are maybe ahead of many of our peers in terms of how we look at the asset quality piece and how we stage some of the names. So your denominator sometimes becomes larger, and it's very difficult to maybe compare it on a fair basis with others. Maybe Giri.
Yes. Thank you once again. We addressed this question a minute ago, but I will repeat what I said. You look at our 2023 provision coverage ratio, it was at 100%, 99.5% to be very precise. During 2024, particularly in Q4, we had to downgrade a big exposure. We don't discuss customer names. From stage 2 to stage 3, that of course impacts the coverage ratio. Having said that, to 89%, it's not 85, it's 88.9. To add, coverage ratio is one metric, an important metric for sure, but that's not the only metric, right? So as the CEO and I mentioned, we are very thoughtful and deliberate in terms of the credits. Like 2/3 of our credit growth was in the GRE segment, number one. Number two, we are very prudent in terms of our staging. We've had feedback from various agencies supervisory included about our staging and how conservative we are. Well, we are both the bankers, traditional bankers. Now we want to make sure that we are well capitalized, liquid, and the asset quality is robust. Then you can play around with fee income margins, etc., to drive profitability. The basics, fundamental, need to be robust, and that's what we've achieved over the period, plan period, please.
The other piece, and we've been discussing it in different forum, including the annual MSX discussion, is also on the recovery. So it's one thing in terms of provisioning, but then efforts in terms of recovering some of the old NPAs. We've been going through all the accounts, etc., making sure that every avenue of recovery. This has resulted again in the highest recovery levels in the recent past. At least I'm not sure whether it's history of the bank, but at least in the recent past, close to about 8.9 million riyals. This includes accounts that are booked in UAE, in Egypt, including Oman as well. And we have a team that is quite frequently visit different geographies that we operate to ensure that every of these NPAs are recovered.
Thank you for that. And the last question, I understand that it's a board decision, and you get this all the time, that when you took over, you had a clear mandate, right? And you've executed most of that. I remember, when you first took over CEO, you had laid down a sort of path for the bank ahead. Now the question is, of course, NBO stands out from the rest of the sector when it comes to the low payout ratio, and the reason is that you wanted to sort of build up your CAR, but of course at the same time you're growing. Now, this year, it wasn't really profitable growth from a funded income point of view, but you're still growing. Now, where do you see being comfortable at CET1, going forward, where you feel like you could become a little more generous with payout ratios and, more in line with where the sector is right now?
We feel that we are very generous this year as well. So I don't know. Are you in agreement or not? So again, we want to be very prudent. If you see our history, we've tried to reset the high dividend payout ratios of the past, right? We used to be maybe on the other side, just pre-pandemic levels. It's very important for us to maintain robust, high-quality capital as well, to ensure that we are able to fuel potential growth. Our loan book has grown faster than the rest of the sector, so that requires a bit of capital there. Few elements that potentially might change it, like I mentioned, the RWA, the risk weightage of certain sectors, might give a bit of relief going forward. And the focus on fee income will also alleviate that as well. But again, we want to make sure that the growth in the payout will be comparable to the growth of the profit numbers. So we want to match those two and make sure we steadily grow and move forward rather than step back when there's an indication of profits.
Okay, I hear you. And I think one thing that you have shown is, retention ratio into ROE is effectively, the long-term sort of growth rate that you can see in earnings. And at least that's keeping up pace, So you're retaining 75% of your profit. And if I multiply by that, by your, ROE, you seem to be growing net profits by that. So at least that's definitely a good sign. I just wanted to leave that on the table as well, because, investors obviously like dividends, and I get that, but eventually the retention is coming at the cost of growth for us, which is always good. So, so I just wanted to put that on the record as well. So appreciate it.
There's a robust discussion at the board between us and the board on an annual basis. A lot of challenges on both sides, etc. And it will be, again, key philosophy is prudency and long-term view of the organization. And again, we want to make sure that we always reward shareholders in line with the profitability growth that we use.
And I mean, this I promise is the last question because I was, I don't see anyone else raising their hand. In terms of size, I've asked you this before now. There's Bank Muscat, who's the industry behemoth with 35%. Sohar is at, I think, asset share of 18%, and who knows what's going to happen in the sector in regards to further consolidation. You, as your management at this 12% market share, are you comfortable that you can play with the big boys when it comes to, let's say, there's another consolidation and there's another large player comes in? So your value that you provide, are you comfortable that will allow you to generate profitable sort of margin, ROE, your aspiration, or is that going to become a challenge as the sector consolidates further? Because I remember your mandate, you had said specifically was increase ROEs, focus internally, and you weren't too interested in mergers. Is what the sense I've got talking to you over the last 3-4 years.
M&A, but we only look at opportunities that are value accretive for our shareholders. So we shy away, say, from kind of bidding wars, etc., etc. So there's a clear mandate from the board that as long as it adds value to shareholders, then we can look at it. So if it's potential destroyer, so we don't chase growth simply for the growth sake there. On the question whether there's an opportunity, I think we believe that there's an opportunity. The last 3 years or 4 years has proven that. If you remember when we started the journey, we were a number 4 bank. If it wasn't for the M&A transaction that happened, potentially we would have been number 2 bank with the market share that we have. We are, this is my personal belief, we are considered, quasi number 2 in terms of a lot of aspects, especially on the corporate side and GRE side. So we do get heads up or priorities in terms of a lot of our discussions. We've been able to play a major role, lead transactions that wasn't the case 3 or 4 years ago. So we believe that we are in a strong position to continue to be of relevance and prominence in the local market, regardless of size.
Fantastic. All the very best to you and the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Abbas. Jasim, you can mute yourself.
السلام عليكم، مساكم الله بالخير اخي عبد الله واختيار ولوان.
عليكم اخبارك؟
الحمد لله، الله يعطيك الصحه والعافيه ابو هشام. سعيدين بتواجدنا معكم. وانا دائما اقول لك يمكن في الاجتماعات او المناقشات هذه، سواء كان البنوك سواء كان الشركات المساهمه العامه، ان شاء الله يمكن نبغى نشوف شباب عمانيين دائما، سواء كان صغار مساهمين سواء كان مستثمرين، لان اعتقد البورصه تحتاج لتفاعلنا مع بعض، وهذه النقاشات اعتقد اكثر من رائعه. لكن للاسف للحين احنا ما قادرين نوصل يعني الاخوان في سواء بورصه مسقط سواء كان ينقصنا نوع من التوعيه. واعتقد ان شاء الله مستقبلا الايام الجايه ان شاء الله بنكون مع بعض كلنا ان شاء الله، ويكون في تفاعل ان شاء الله، سواء من الشباب اللي جايين للسوق اللي هم سواء خريجين في القطاعات الماليه والاقتصاديه. اعتقد التثقيف المالي بنحتاج له كثير في الايام القادمه ان شاء الله، واتمنى نشوف شباب يكونوا يشاركوا، وان شاء الله انا هذا اللي اتامله ان شاء الله بعون الله. فانا يمكن سعيد ان اكون معك اخي عبد الله، انت اخ عزيز وزماله يعني، والواحد يفتخر بالشباب العمانيين الموجودين على يعني معظم الشركات المحليه اللي عندنا. امس انا كنت في يمكن شاركت مع الاخوان في البورصه، كان في ملتقى على اساس ان اللي هو اكتتاب شركه شو اسمها هذه النقل البحري اسياد. الحقيقه كان ينقصنا وجود الشباب اللي هم الخريجين، يمكن الاثار السلبيه البسيطه اللي حصلت في الاكتتابات اللي راحت، يمكن اللي هدول شويه سلبي. لكن نحن كانسان كناس يعني نفهم في الاقتصاد بطريقه معينه او بطريقه بسيطه، المفروض يكون له دور، لان الشركه انا اعتبرها صراحه من افضل الشركات، العائد مالها بيكون 12.4، بس يمكن اللي حصل في السوق او اللي حاصل في السوق. لكن ان شاء الله بعون الله نجلس مع الاخوان كلنا، الناس اللي فاهمه والاخوان المسؤولين، وان شاء الله نوصل لامور افضل بعون الله ان شاء الله لبلدنا ولاقتصادنا وللامور كلها بشكل عام. اليوم اعتقد ملتقى نعم نتقدم، يعني كان انا اتمنى حتى عندكم الشباب هناك اخ عبد الله بما انك القائد في البنك نتوجه يعني الموظفين اللي عندك، اتمنى موجود هو كله على الاونلاين، موجود حتى على المواقع اللي هي على تويت على عفوا على اسمها هذه اللي هي اليوتيوب. انا اتمنى اشوف الشباب يعني يشوفوا هذه المؤتمرات وهذه المنتديات، لانها بتكون لها قيمه كثير اكثر من رائعه، وهذا تواصل ما بين الحكومه وما بين يعني افراد المجتمع، طرح رؤاهم مثل ما نحن الحين موجودين في هذه النقاشات. هذه اشياء جيده كثيره. البنوك يعني يمكن نحن كنا موظفين بنوك يا اخي عبد الله، وكنا زملاء مثل ما قلت لك، ما فيها شيء كبير، اللهم قروض وودائع ورسوم، هذه اساس البنوك يعني. فيمكن هذه النقاشات لازم تكون بشكل بسيط، فانا عشان وجودي موجود يعني معاكم على اساس انه يعني اوصل الفكره هذه. اسمح لي خذت من وقتك كثير اخي عبد الله، لكن بما انه يعني انا شفت يمكن الارقام قبل شوي، مدخلت التفاصيل الارقام عندكم شوي نوعا ما، انا اللي ملاحظ البنوك اللي هي يمكن نسميها بنوك صغيره متاثره كثير بالدخل الفائده اللي هو الاساس في اساس انه هو الارباح البنك، فيمكن يعوض بعض الاحيان ببعض البنوك الرسوم، زياده الرسوم. فيعني انا شايف يعني على اساس انه يمكن هذه الامور تكون لها حلول. يمكن من وجهه نظري ما في غير، انا شايف يمكن اندماج البنوك الصغيره او حتى فتح فروع يعني. فما ادري ايش تصورك اخي عبد الله، يعني يمكن النتائج ممكن نتكلم عنها بعد شويه. فانت كانسان اقتصادي ومالي ما اعرف ايش توجهكم يعني انا شفت الاستراتيجيه مالكم اخر 5 سنوات وانت ما قصرت، يعني مسكت هالبنك وعملت الطريقه المناسبه. يعني كان عندهم مشاكل نوعا ما في الاداره السابقه من ناحيه القروض المتعثره، كان لها اثار سلبيه على ارباح البنك، وصل اظن قبل في 2017 2018 وصل ل 60 مليون ارباح البنك، وبعدين تاثرت يمكن فرعكم في ابو ظبي، وانا حتى كان عندي اسهم، بعض الاسهم ممكن في اجتماع جمعيه، والحقيقه كان لي مداخله واكيد مسجله في محضر الاجتماع. فانا اتمنى بانك انت الحين قائد لهذا البنك وشايف الوضع الاقتصادي، ايش اللي توجه البنك يعني في السنين القادمه؟ هل في ممكن يكون توجه؟ لان الفروع اعتقد انت يمكن ما عندك التوجه في الفروع، شايف المصاريف مالكم ثابته، يمكن حتى عندك الو. فما اعرف ايش توجهك اخي عبد الله اذا كان في الامكان.
بالفعل السنه الماضيه كان في انخفاض او تاثير من ناحيه تكلفه الفوائد اكثر من العوائد من الفوائد. فمثل ما ذكرنا في السابق، تركيزنا كان بالفتره الماضيه على الشركات الحكوميه وايضا التمويل الحكومي بشكل مباشر لعده اسباب. اولا نوعا ما اقل مخاطره، تضيف لنا دخل من الرسوم الى اخره، فكانت عامل مساعد خلال فتره انتقاليه للمؤسسه. مثل ما تفضلت واجهتنا عده صعوبات في 2019 و2020 وتحديدا من ناحيه الظروف المتعثره، فكان من المجدي ان نركز على النوعيه الافضل من الكشافات حتى تساعدنا نخرج من مرحله كانت مرحله صعبه، وهي جزء اساسي من استراتيجيتنا تكلمنا فيها في السابق، وتحديدا ما يسمى بالاسيت كواليتي او نوعيه الاصول. لكن في المرحله القادمه اولا خلينا نركز اول شيء على 2021. اكثر تاثير كان في الربع الاول من 2021، لكن على خلال السنه قدرنا واستطعنا على تخفيض تكلفه الفائده او استثمار الفائده حساب الارباح والخسائر. كان ذلك من خلال تنويع مصادر التمويل، سواء من السلطنه من خلال ايداعات او من قروض مشتركه، او حتى خارج السلطنه من خلال علاقاتنا مع بنوك اقليميه ودوليه. وهذا ساعدنا كثير في تخفيض التكلفه وساعد ايضا في الدخل. المرحله القادمه او مستقبلا نتوقع انه بيكون في نوع من الاستقرار من هذه الناحيه، لكن كانت توقعات في الربع الاخير من العام الماضي ان البنك الفيدرالي الأمريكي بيقوم بتخفيض سعر الفائدة عدة مرات خلال سنة 2023، لكن اليوم أغلب التوقعات، خلينا نركز على موضوع 3 خطوط تحت التوقعات، هي توقعات فقط، إنه ممكن الانخفاض من البنك الفيدرالي الأمريكي ويكون مرة واحدة وبنسبة بسيطة جدا، الناس يتكلموا ما بين 25 نقطة أو إلى 50 نقطة بالكثير. فالتوقعات حاليا انه بيكون في نوع من الاستقرار، ما في انخفاض، وما نتوقع انه بيكون في زياده. لكن المهم ان نركز على مصادر دخل اخرى وهي في الرسوم، وما معناته ان مركزين على الرسوم بان بنزيد الرسوم، لكن تركيز في انواع من الاعمال المتعلقه بالبنوك غير عن القرار فقط، مثل تمويل التجاره الدوليه trade finance، وهذا دخل جيد. اعمال بنوك الاستثمار، وانت تعرف ان البنك الوطني كان من اوائل البنوك اللي حصل على ترخيص للاستشارات الماليه البساطه واداره الاصول. زاد التركيز وبدينا نعين كفاءات وكفاءات عمانيه تحديدا في هذه القطاعات، وكان هذا التزام لنا لعملائنا اللي كانوا يطالبوا، وايضا للمجتمع بشكل عام. فهناك تركيز كبير لما يسمى الانفستمنت بانكينج. اطلقنا شريحه جديده كان في نهايه 2023 اللي هو البرايفت بانكينج. كان عندنا الصداره، وهي اسم معروف او براند معروف في السوق، لكن قمنا ب عملنا شريحه جديده اللي هي البرايفت بانكينج، وبدا ايضا تعطينا عوائد جيده، ونتوقع ان بنركز فيها خلال الفتره القادمه. فكل هذه الاعمال بتساعدنا الى تخفيف تاثير انخفاض اسعار الفائده على حساب الارقام. ان شاء الله جاوبت على السؤال.
اخ عبد الله ما قصرت، بس اعتقد يعني بالنسبه للفدرالي بشكل عام، صحيح ان السنه الماضيه كان في تخفيض حوالي 3 مرات بحدود 1%. يمكن نحن في البنوك عندنا ما عندنا، يمكن بما انه يعني المواطنين بشكل عام يمكن الحسابات كلها ما لهم ودائع توفير، ودائع اللي هي الفيكس ديبوزيت يمكن المتوسط واصل ل6، لكن الفدرالي 4.5 تقريبا. فبالتالي يمكن احنا الفدرالي يمكن تاثيره انا محدود، اعتبره محدود يعني على الودائع مالنا بشكل عام. لكن المشكله في البنوك الصغيره يمكن القروض، يمكن الودائع اللي عندها اللي هي اللو بنسميها لو كوست ديبوزيت. يعني لما نشوف الحين عندنا بنكين كبار صاروا، يعني بعد ما صار اندماج واحد من البنوك، البنك القائد اللي هو بنك مسقط، وهذه البنوك يعني ما شاء الله الفوائد اللي يمكن تندفع على الودائع مالها يمكن اشوفها انا اقل لما الاحظ قيمه الفائده. فهذا يعطيها قوه، يعني هي هذه دائما قوه الاندماجات في البنوك اللي هي الصغيره، يصير هذا الاثر الايجابي على اداء البنك. يعني انا كنت الاحظ الحقيقه قبل شويه فتحت على بعض البنوك اللي عندنا، فلما شفت مالكم الفوائد اللي هي على القروض ارتفعت السنه هذه على متوسط المحفظه الاقراضيه مالكم، صراحه يعني تفاجات، لان نحن نبغي الفوائد على المتوسط القروض في كل البنوك اقل ما يكون، على اساس ندعم الاقتصاد. فيمكن التاثير سلبي على البنك، لكن في مثل ما تقول اذا كانت فرص موجوده في البنوك الثانيه باسعار فائده اقل بيكون عندكم صعوبه مثل ما تقول في تمويل بعض المشاريع. يعني مثلا انتم ارتفعتوا من 5.96 في القروض المحفظه الى 6.24، لكن لما نشوف البنوك، وطبعا هذا ينطبق على كل البنوك الصغيره اللي تاثرت مع هذا، دخل الفائده انخفض عن السنه الماضيه، بدل المفروض يكون له دور يكون يرتفع اقل شيء. بالنسبه للبنوك الكبيره ما شاء الله بالعكس، بعض البنوك اشوفها من السنه الماضيه نزلت بعد حتى المتوسط، فهذا شيء ايجابي. يعني الناس يمكن ما تعرف هذه الامور، لكن نحن دورنا كاقتصاديين يعني نشوف هذه الاشياء البسيطه، ونحن حتى كمستثمرين لها علاقه. فبالتالي يعني اندماج البنوك وتوجه مجالس الادارات المفروض، يعني بغض النظر عن من يملك البنوك يعني، لكن اعتقد انا في رايي الشخصي وجود بنوك يعني صغيره بيكون فيها مشكله. انا عارف امكانياتك يا اخي عبد الله، يمكن من ناحيه انك عارف تقرا الارقام وعارف تقدر قدر ما يمكن انك يعني يكون الارباح البنك يعني بمستوى عالي، لكن ترى هي ارقام في النهايه ومثل ما قلت لك يمكن هي اسعار الفوائد اللي هي الفوائد صافي الفائده هو الاساس لكل بنك. لاحظت نفس الشيء بالنسبه للودائع، انت تضطر تاخذ ودائع عاليه، يعني الودائع مالك من التوفير اعتقد ما تغيرت من السنه الماضيه، النتيجه لان فروعك محدوده، لكن البنوك الثانيه الكبيره ما شاء الله زادت ودائع التوفير اللي هي لو كوست ديبوزيت. عندك المتوسط الودائع مالك يمكن اللي هي مثل ما تقول الودائع الثابته يعني ارتفع من حوالي، هي اثرت على مستوى الفائده. هذا رايي الشخصي يا اخي عبد الله. انا عارف انت انسان من الكفاءات اللي الواحد ان شاء الله نشوف المستقبل في اماكن ان شاء الله اكبر بعون الله ان شاء الله. يمكن ما بنتكلم كثير عن الفائده. انا بس بغيت بالنسبه لتوزيع الربح، يعني انتم السنه الماضيه وزعتوا 8.5 والسنه اقترحتوا مجلس الاداره على 9.4. يمكن كثير من الناس اللي صغار المساهمين طبعا اسهم البنك معظمها عند كبار المساهمين، يمكن حتى السيوله او حتى مثل ما تقول يعني خمسه اقل من 5% عند صغار المساهمين، فيمكن تداول السهم محدود، وبعدين سعر السهم ثابت على اساس ان العوائد متوسط العائده على سعر السهم السوقي يمكن اقل من 3% او 3% بيكون هذه السنه، فبالتالي الناس كانت تنتظر العوائد، فبالتالي ما اعرف يعني لو اعطيت واقترحت يعني بالاضافه للكاش لو عملت اسهم مجانيه 5% على الاقل، لان الاسهم المجانيه تعطي دفع لراس المال، يعني اللي هي النسب اللي هي انتم، انا ما اعرف يمكن اكون غلطان، لكن اعتقد من ناحيه منطقيه اذا اعطيته اسهم مجانيه بيكون في نفس يعني من ناحيه مسميها نحن اللي هو نسب الكفاءه راس المال، اعتقد بتكون نفس بدل ما تحطوها في حساب الارباح والخسائر. اعتقد ان هذا اللي افكر فيه، ما ادري اذا كان لك وجهه نظر ثانيه اخي عبد الله.
الموضوع الاول بالنسبه من ناحيه صافي الدخل من الفوائد، وايضا النمو في محفظه الاقراض والايداعات. العكس، المحفظه الاقراضيه نمت في البنك الوطني ب 12% تقريبا العام الماضي، مقارنه بالقطاع 7%، يعني تقريبا ضعف. بالنسبه للايداع او الايداعات، بالنسبه للبنك الوطني نما ب 14% مقارنه بالقطاع بشكل عام 9.7. فبالنسبه للبنك الوطني ما كان في اشكاليه من ناحيه القروض، بالعكس. ممكن من الاسباب لان الدخل من الفوائد ارتفع عن العام الماضي، لان حوالي 18% من محفظتنا بالدولار والاقراض بالدولار، فكان نمو طبيعي مع اسعار الفائده اللي كانت موجوده خلال الفتره الماضيه. وايضا عندنا جزء من التمويل ناخذه، لان لازم لكل قروض نقدمها بالدولار لازم يكون عندنا تمويل بالدولار. وايضا عندنا مجموعه من القروض كانت من بنوك اقليميه وبنوك دوليه بالدولار ايضا، بسبب قدرتنا على استقطاب ايداعات وتمويل من مصادر اخرى، قدرنا ان ندفع ونلغي بعض القروض اللي كانت عاليه التكلفه. وهذا ساعدنا كما ذكرت، كان التاثير اكثر في بدايه 2024، وتحسن الوضع خلال العام الى ان وصل الى مستويات جيده في نهايه السنه 2024، بس هي تعقيب للفاضلين. بالنسبه لاعلان التوزيعات او التوزيعات المقترحه، سياستنا ان نحاول ان نحافظ على نوعيه وحجم راس المال. ليش نتكلم عن نوعيه؟ ان ما نريد ان نقوم باصدارات مختلفه ذات نوعيه اقل، فنحاول نحافظ قدر الامكان على الارباح واعاده استخدامها للمستقبل. لو تتذكر قبل الجائحه كانت توزيعات عاليه بالنسبه للبنك الوطني، لكن مناقشتنا مع مجلس الاداره ارتئينا ان نكون شويه متحفظين اكثر، نزيد من التوزيعات حسب الزياده في الارباح. واذا تلاحظ ان الزياده كانت تقريبا في التوزيعات المقترحه حوالي 10%، وهذه مقارنة جدا للزيادة في الأرباح اللي كانت حوالي 8-9% العام الماضي. فنحن نستهدف أن التوزيعات أو زيادة التوزيعات عن العام اللي سابق تكون مساوية للزيادة في الأرباح حفاظا على قوة رأس مال البنك.
شكرا اخي عبد الله، لكن مثل ما اخذ لك يمكن الاسهم المجانيه بتكون في راس المال، يعني ما بتكون تطلع برا البنك، فهذا كل واحد يعني له راي، فاتمنى، لكن هي مؤثره على صغار المساهمين بشكل عام. حتى بالنسبه لسعر السهم يمكن دائما ما بذيك الموسمه يعني التفاوت اللي عليه. عموما شكرا لسعه صدرك ويعني ردودك.
سعر السهم ارتفع بشكل جيد العام الماضي، اعتقد وصل مستوى 300 بيسة تقريبا، شويه نزل بعد لكن حافظ يعني الحمد لله
280 بيسة تقريبا. نعم. هي ترى مثل ما قلت لك اسعار الاسهم السوقيه يعتمد على العرض والطلب، لكن يعني الواحد المساهمين الصغار دائما ينتظروا عوائد سنويه تكون على الاقل مجزيه 5% اللي هو النورمال البنك الموسمه، يعني العوائد المتعودين يعني الواحد كان يعني عوائد السوق بشكل عام يعني. عموما شاكر لك هذه يعني الردود، ويمكن في شيء اخير ممكن انا اطلب منك اخي عبد الله. انا شفت مالكم مال التدريب ما شاء الله اكثر من 500 او 600 شخص من الخريجين يمكن يتدربوا معكم في البنوك، يمكن بعض البنوك نفس الحاله خلال السنه هذه، نفس الشيء في البنوك الثانيه. وكان لي توجه في مع بعض الشركات الاخوان رؤساء التنفيذيين ان على الاقل نعطي هذا الشباب مكافآت بسيطه، ونفس الشيء يكون في متابعه من دوائر التدريب على اساس انه يستفيدوا. يعني الواحد يجي شهر او شهرين يتدرب، يمكن حتى يطلع من البنك ومجرد ان البنك يفتح حساب ويفتح يعني على مستوى الفروع. فبالتالي نحن لو يكون في يعني مثل ما تقول توجيه من اماكن العمل اللي هي يعني نعطيهم شويه مثل ما تقول اتنشن، او نعطيهم شويه يعني نخلي بالنا عليهم على اساس انه يمكن يكون عندهم مخرجات ما شاء الله، بعضهم المخرجات الماليه ومخرجات، لكن لما تبغي يعني يسوي لك تحليل مالي بسيط تلاقي عنده صعوبه. انت تعرف المستوى بعض المستويات عندنا الاكاديميه، يعني المخرجات عندنا 30-40 الف كل سنه، فيحتاج شويه نساعدهم بطريقه معينه. هذا دورنا يعني نحن كاصحاب خبره، كلنا دور المسؤولين في هذه المؤسسات. ونفس الشيء المكافاه ما بتكون كبيره، مكافاه بسيطه وما في يكون عليها تكاليف على كل المؤسسات، سواء كان مؤسسات ماليه، سواء كان شركات كبيره، اتصالات ما اتصالات. انا اتمنى ان شاء الله يمكن بيكون ان شاء الله مستقبلا مع بعض الاخوه ان شاء الله نقدر نوصل لاشياء تفيد المجتمع بشكل عام. وسعيد بهذا التواصل اخي عبد الله، اتمنى لك التوفيق انت وزملائك ونشوف البنك الوطني كل البنوك يكون له دور كبير ايجابي في دعم الاقتصاد ان شاء الله باذن الله. سعيد بهذا التواصل. شكرا.
بخير، رمضان كريم
علينا وعليك ان شاء الله. الله ان شاء الله يكون عام رمضان خير وبركه على الجميع ان شاء الله. ونتمنى نكون البنوك تساهم في هذا الشهر الكريم بطريقه ان شاء الله اكثر كرم بعون الله ان شاء الله. شكرا.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and see you in the upcoming sessions, inshallah.
Ramadan Kareem to all of you.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you.